Welcome back to Music at the Dub. For those of you who don't know, I'm your host, Logan Sasser, and on this show, I have real conversations with musicians about their life, music, and everything in between. Before we start, I want to shout out another Hawkstream podcast called Talk Hollywood to Me. It's a show hosted by Sierra McLean, where she talks about the stories and relationships in Hollywood that have given the industry its absurd and fantastic reputation. All right. So to start off, if you could just play some harmonica for the intro. I noticed that time you made a sound that kind of sounded like almost a bird fluttering. That was interesting.
Yeah, so I've tried to work on getting little pieces of stuff from this harmonica player or that harmonica player. Mm-hmm. And then you discover stuff on your own, and then there's an ability to sort of cause almost a distortion or overdrive, kind of a rapid with the certain kind of breathing. And then I said, hey, that sounds cool.
That's cool because on the guitar, when you do overdrive or anything like that, it's strictly mechanical.
Right.
You know, you have machines that do that. And on the harmonica, obviously, you don't.
Right. And part of that was because I wanted to be able to do that Chicago blues sound, but they're using a mic that had a crystal in it, so it would overdrive the crystal. So it had the same kind of mechanical overdrive that happens in a guitar, just through a different mechanism. And then they were typically going through a tube amp like a guitar, and I wasn't doing that, and so I was like, how do I get some of that in there without me having to have all of that mechanical equipment, because I'm usually going through either a vocal mic or a harmonica mic that isn't a crystal mic, because crystal mics are cool, except they're fragile.
Are they expensive?
Not particularly expensive, but again, you get what you pay for. So I can get a cheap crystal mic, but then they can be persnickety. It's a little like having a real Fender Rhodes piano or a real B3 organ. They're awesome, but there's a lot of things that can go wrong.
Delicate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I'm here with Dr. Richard Olsen.
Yep.
Thank you for coming out. Tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
So I'm known around these parts as Dr. O, and I teach a hardcore research methods class. But when I'm not having to do all of that, I really enjoy music, making music with friends of mine, particularly if it's soulful, bluesy, acoustic music. So that's a lot of fun. And it all started way back in high school when somebody gave me a Hohner C harmonica for a birthday present, and I was driving all over the state doing this and that, and going up to Vermont to visit a friend of mine. And back in the day of cassette tapes, I was just popping in a cassette tape and playing along with it and figuring it out.
Do you still have that harmonica, the first one you got?
Not the first one. They can go bad, just the reeds get rusty and all that sort of thing. And then I put it away for grad school, and next thing you know, where did that go?
Yep. Happens. And a harmonica, I don't think is necessarily something that you want to pass down to your kids, putting your mouth on it and everything like that.
No, you can take them apart and soak them in mouthwash and clean them up if you buy one at a yard sale. So if you did stumble across a cheap one and you say, hey, I want to play that, yeah, you can get a little tiny eyeglass screwdriver, take it apart, soak it in some mouthwash, put it back together.
Sounds like a little bit of a science experiment too. Might be fun.
Well, I've had people come up to me, usually after a few beers, and say, hey, can I try your harmonica? I'm like,
not exactly.
I don't know you that well, do you?
Yeah, please no. So you are 1/3 of the Schoolboys trio now?
Correct.
It used to be how many members? 5?
We had a 5, and at one point when we first started, we were actually 6. We had 2 electric guitars, so we were a mega band. But obviously, there's not a lot of call for that much noise and sound and space in the Wilmington area. So over the years, we quickly went to a 5-piece, and then eventually, after about 20 years together, we all said, there were some guys in the band that wanted to do other projects, and we're like, go do them. Do your thing. You're not quitting the band. We just had our run, and then we just decided with the brewery scene blowing up and smaller venues kind of coming on, we were like, let's just do our thing as a trio.
Yeah, I think that's a smart decision because, breweries are not normally looking for these grand,
Right.
huge performances.
Right.
It's more just like something to play in the background for people to enjoy, pleasant on the ears.
Right. And we try and be audience centered, but also, without trying to sound like that guy, having done bigger shows, again, at least in our level, having done some festivals, having done, parks full of people and larger sound systems and all that sort of thing, those, I would still have a blast at those venues, but it's also it's really nice to just lean over and say, hey, let's do this song next, and everybody's right around, and
it's a lot more personal.
It is, and it's a lot of fun.
So I saw that you guys performed on the Battleship downtown.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Well, we had a corporate gig. It was a blast, because the venue was just so unique.
Incredible, yeah.
I will say it was one of our longer load-ins because you have to take everything up ramps and around to this and over that, and
Sounds complicated.
But it was cool because that was my summer job way back when I was a college student.
Oh, really?
Working there on the summers, so. It was also going back home a little bit again and kind of going, I remember those alligators and all of that stuff.
What did you do on the Battleship?
I just made sure nobody was getting hurt, so I would walk the tour routes backwards to make sure nobody was vandalizing, lost, hurt, because you fall down some steep steps, you're landing on hard steel. So
and nobody wants that.
Yeah, nobody wants that. And so, just making sure nobody's trying to scrape something off for grandpa, or something.
Yeah.
So it was a fun job to be around all that history.
Cool.
Yeah.
So you guys have been together for 20 years, over 20 years.
Yep.
That's a long time to, number one, to practice music. I'm sure that you grow over the years as you would at anything you practice, but it's also a long time to form bonds with the people that you are making music with. And that's always been something that's really curious to me. I've talked to other people on the show about the connection that you could form through music with the people that you interact with that way.
Yeah, and that was really, because we were all faculty here, that's been, I think, one of the reasons we've been able to stay together, because we were in similar phases of life. Our kids are about the same age. We were dealing with tenure, we're dealing with research, we're dealing with students, we're dealing with administration. And so the rehearsals were, part music, part rehearsal, part practice, part therapy.
It's like an escape from everything else.
Yeah, so some of us went through some pretty big adventures of life together. Births of our kids, high school graduations of our kids, deaths of our parents. I had a gig a day after my dad died, and there was no place I wanted to be because two of these other guys had lost their dads in the last 3 years. So we crushed it at this jam, and just tearing up solos, doubling solos. I had a picture of my dad on the keyboard. And, my family didn't get it. They were like, what are you doing? And I'm like, well, first of all, my dad was an actor. And he's like, show must go on. So I'm like, so I'm doing this in honor of him specifically for that. But also I'm like, I'm with my brothers in arms that have been through this too. And I'm crying at the end of the gig, and they know why, and nobody else knows why. And they're just putting their arms around me, and we're like, yeah, dude, we get it.
It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Did your dad, growing up, encourage you to do something artistic? Not even necessarily music, but being an actor. I'm sure that influence is there.
Oh yeah, and he played drums in a Dixieland band. And,
oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and he was a triple threat, as they say in theater. So he was singer, dancer, actor. And so I grew up around it. It was really interesting, though. Until you hear your music, you don't. The piano lessons and the music lessons and stuff.
They only do so much.
They just seem stupid, And then you hear something like a blues note, or you hear, R&B, or you hear rap, or you hear whatever you hear, and you go, wait a minute, that's Johnny Cash or whatever. You hear so many of those stories when you hear it from musicians. They go, I got this album and I wore it out.
Yeah, they know the exact moment when they were like, this is what I want to do. Yeah. I found a passion.
Yeah, and that happened to me in high school choir class. The teacher had to go out and take a phone call, and we literally had this blind African-American student in our class. Of course, he idolized Stevie Wonder. So he walks down to the piano, gets guided down to the piano, and just starts wailing on this piano, Stevie Wonder style. And that was the first time I'd ever seen that kind of music live. And it was no longer a magic trick that I'm hearing through speakers. I'm watching this kid do it, and I'm like, oh, that's what I want to do. I want to play piano like that.
Yeah.
I never got there, but I've spent a lifetime enjoying trying.
That's it's also interesting. We were talking about earlier how sometimes you can hear music like a guitar and it sounds so simple until you see it live or you look into it and they're playing all these crazy kind of chords that you can't even pronounce and all this stuff.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting. What kind of music do you guys play primarily?
We play the kind of music you might expect some 50-something-year-old white guys to play, but we enjoy it. I mean, we do some older 70s stuff, but we try and find some newer stuff that sounds, shares that kind of musical sensibility. Amos Lee, Trained, some of those guys that are doing some soulful pop and some soulful, new stuff. We do... oh my gosh, I just drew a blank on his name. Country rock artist right now, Tennessee Whiskey, and
I know exactly who you're talking about, but I can't think of his name.
He's got the beard and the whole bit going on. And we do one of his other songs, Midnight Train to Memphis, rock out a little bit. So we're trying to find stuff that is continuing that line of music.
Okay. And that kind of stuff is pretty popular down here, especially being in the South.
Yeah. Oh,
you know, country music and country-inspired rock. It's a very big sound down here.
Yeah. And I think one of the other things that's happening as we've grown as a band, and especially as a trio now, we don't have to feel like we have to nail the original. Part of that was a growth period and a trust in our own musical sensibility instead of being a cover band. It's sort of saying, okay, well, we're cover-inspired, but then what do we want to do? What are our musical sensibilities? And
put your own twist on it.
Yeah, and sometimes when we were a 5-piece, it was creating 5-part harmony for a song that didn't have it and doing a cappella breakdowns. And now it's much more about finding a swampy groove on something that didn't necessarily come with that. So we actually do Staying Alive by the Bee Gees. But have slowed it down a little bit, doing different instrumentation and a different vibe to the whole song. Because the lyrics, it's a blues song, but you just don't know that because of the disco.
Yeah.
You can tell by the way I walked down the sidewalk. I'm a woman's man, no time to talk. And
I would love to hear you sing that song.
He's a down and out dude. He's a down and out dude whose only hope is that he can dance, right? So it's very bluesy.
Never thought about that.
And so once you slow it down, then you really get to appreciate the lyric because it's not doing that Bee Gees.
Yeah, you're not distracted by everything else. Yeah. Do you guys make any of your own songs, or is it strictly you do some covers and you put your own spin on it?
We've had some fun taking more of changing the lyrics of a common song to fit academic circumstances.
Oh, of course.
So we've done some fun, like Never Been to Spain, which is a rock classic done by many bands. We changed that up to I've Never Been to Randall. So, because we're just thinking about a freshman who's never been to the library, and we just started goofing on it at a rehearsal, and we were like, "Oh, that'll be fun."
You should play it at orientation.
Yes, exactly. That's what we were thinking about. Like, that'd be funny for the parents.
Did it ever work out?
No, we played it at some gigs, and some folks would laugh at it pretty hard.
People that are in the know.
Yeah.
That are in the right circle. So I know you guys also perform for Rock for a Cure, which is a really cool thing that I didn't know too much about until I was doing some research for this podcast. And I would love for you to tell people what that's all about.
Yeah, so for many, many years, one of our classes and one of our faculty worked with the Pink Ribbon Foundation to create a fundraiser that was at a level that students could participate in. It wasn't a $100 plate dinner or something like that, right? And so it grew and grew and grew, and then eventually our students were actually at the big, events that were thanking all the contributors, and that was a great networking. Pink Ribbon is reorganizing, because they feel like the awareness phase is successful. Almost every woman knows what to do, and so they're actually restructuring, and we took that time to also step back and with our student organization and say, it was awesome doing everything at that scale, but it started to be the tail that wagged the dog a little bit.
Yeah.
And I said, if we're really just going to learn how to do a campaign well, maybe let's find an organization for whom $500 really, really matters.
It goes a long way.
Because when you're talking about cancer research, you need millions. Now, this was cancer care, so the money was going pretty far. But there are some organizations in this town for whom $1,000 would be life-changing in terms of the life of that organization. And so we said, let's go find a small one and be their big benefactor. And so that's what we're doing right now. We're trying to figure out over the next couple of years, like who's going to be our partner and hopefully it'll get back to where we're playing a gig and doing that sort of thing. But we love doing fundraisers because everybody's there partying with a purpose. There's a few things better than that.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing to take your talent and your passion and to do something good with it. Because a lot of people, they have these passions and it's hard for them to focus it on a way to improve other people's circumstances or the world around them. So I really respect that. I know your interest in music goes more than just being in a band. I recently learned that you taught a class, or at least were part of a class called Protest Music.
Yep.
How did that go?
Well, my background is communication studies, which has its roots in rhetoric and persuasion from the ancient Greeks on up. So one of the things I wanted to do, and the honors program here, allows you to kind of explore some of those specialty classes, is connect my enjoyment of music with this whole way that music is so often used, which is to encourage social change. And so, we certainly looked at civil rights, but there's so many other ways in which music has been used to encourage social change, and it's happening now. I know we're going to see some artists doing some really good stuff on climate change. Sting had a wonderful during the Cold War. Sting from the Police had a wonderful song, "If the Russians Love Their Children Too."
Yeah, and it's cool that you mentioned that because. Maybe you remember this, maybe you don't, but Doug Yeager came last spring, I believe.
Yep.
And I got to get dinner with you and him and talk about his documentary. I wrote a piece on it in the newspaper, and that was such a cool thing for me to experience. And for those of you who don't know, the documentary is called Free to Rock, and it's all about how rock music helped bring down the Soviet Union during the Cold War.
And his passion continued. I loved meeting him because he was just inspirational to me.
Such a cool guy. So many cool stories.
Infinite passion and energy. And he's still going all over the world with that film, going in. And again, you sort of say, oh, well, been there, done that. We're past that. It's like, no, we're not.
And it'll always be
every
there.
generation has to be vigilant,
And it's just adapting to the different kinds of problems. Like right now, like you said, climate change is a really big thing that I don't necessarily think music is caught up with all the way, but it'll get there.
And the thing is, music doesn't always have the answers, but sometimes it puts you in the mindset to be open to the answers. Like this migration problem. There's no easy answers. How do you take in 1 million people? How do you do this? How do you do that? How do you make sure that language barriers get... But, once you sort of go, we want to live in a world where there's love and peace, there's a mindset for, okay, now we can work out the particulars, Music isn't policy, but it can get you ready, for change.
True. I also read that you did some research with MTV or for MTV.
Yeah, no, I looked at one of their most popular shows at the time when we were doing the research, which was TRL, Total Request Live. And it was, at the time, one of the most popular cable shows in the history of cable television.
What was it? What was the show?
It was MTV's kind of after school show. So you're coming home and you're watching TRL, and it was Carson Daly was the host, a young Carson Daly, and he would bring on musical artists. And the way the stage was set up, it was very informal. They would come on, they would chat. Very little live music. They would usually cut to some other kinds of music. And so it was this combination of talk show, variety show, audience participation show, and it was insanely popular. And still ranks as one of MTV's most popular shows ever. Back when, of course, MTV was a much more radical new thing than it is now.
Yeah, now MTV has definitely died down. It went through a lot of changes to going from music television to focus on reality shows and all this kind of stuff, and didn't have the best reputation for a couple of years. And now I don't even really know too much about what MTV is doing.
No, and that's the thing, right? But this was a show that, quote unquote, everybody was watching.
When was it aired?
It was in the, I want to say, 90s, early aughts. It's been a while since I've done that example, but it was, so Carson Daly, if you've seen him on, what show is he hosting now?
Not sure.
But yeah, so he's in his 40s, he was in his 20s, so you're talking
20-ish years ago, 90s.
Yeah. But again, it was
insanely popular.
Yeah. It was it.
So what did you do with that show?
Well, we just looked at how they were creating such a successful show from a communication perspective. You know, looking at everything from, you know, how the audience was positioned relative to the guests. So, you know, typically the guest is elevated, they're up on the stage. This time they were down in a pit and the audience was up, and so it was a much more egalitarian thing, but it wasn't like a steep pit, it wasn't like an opera house. It was much more, you're in mom's basement, it just happens to be
recorded
in New York. And then Carson's role was, he's a chameleon. So when he was with somebody who was a little more street and urban, he sort of had a persona that was a little more, I got you, dog. And then when he was dealing with somebody who was more pop rock, he was much more pop rock persona. So his ability to sort of code switch was a big key to the show's success.
Cool. So I know you also taught, this isn't necessarily music related, but you taught a class called Sports as Popular Ritual.
Yep.
Yeah. And did you see the Super Bowl last night?
I did.
What did you think of the halftime show? Because there's a little bit of controversy on it right now. Because it's a little raunchy, and their families. But
I think, and I think to me, the show was exceptionally well done. To me,
I agree.
To me, it was, the production value was amazing, the talent was amazing, the scale was amazing, everything was amazing. The costumes were perfectly appropriate for a different venue.
Yeah.
The challenge, I think, is what is the Super Bowl?
Yeah.
Is the Super Bowl a high-priced corporate event, which is what it's become in terms of live?
Yeah.
Or is it the Ed Sullivan Show, or is it a primetime television program? So the challenge right now, I think, is that it is two things. It is a high-priced corporate event, and it is supposedly primetime television. And so you have two different expectations and standards depending on what that is. If I'm taking some high-paying clients to Vegas, we just saw a great Vegas show.
Yeah.
That's not what thousands of church youth groups who are having Super Bowl nights are signing up for.
That's true.
When the youth pastor says, come on over, we're going to have, in the basement of the church, we're going to have the big screen going, we have all the popcorn you can eat, blah, 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 blah. And then what are we supposed to do?
And that comes on. Yeah.
So I think that's the challenge. I think they need to sort of say, okay, we're going to figure this out. Because last year was just as bad. He's taking off his shirt, and it's all that sort of stuff. So
but last year, I didn't think, I really enjoyed this year's halftime show. I thought it was a lot more grand, a lot more spectacular, and I just thought the performances were also really cool. I also really liked how they incorporated another culture into it, bringing on, who is it, Bad Bunny, and I think Daddy Yankee or Pitbull were also on there, and also J-Lo.
Spanish lyrics. I mean, there was so much right that it's unfortunate that we have to talk about but this is where music and rhetoric come together. Nobody's critiquing the notes.
Yeah,
they're critiquing what seems to have been a message about morality or in fact it goes all the way back to ancient Greece. Is did the message fit the situation, or did it violate the situation? So we're actually having an argument over what is the situation. And
I think part of this is because it took place in Miami, and there's a big culture in Miami for Spanish music and that kind of dancing. I grew up in Fort Lauderdale I spent 12 years there. And I was like 45 minutes out from Miami, and the Spanish culture there is huge. My stepmom is Colombian, and she took me around and showed me that part of it. And they view, I don't want to say they view sexuality different, but that kind of dancing is more appropriate in their culture.
Yeah, and again, I don't think the dancing would have been the problem. I think it probably is almost all about J-Lo's costume choice, right? And again, I'm not saying that. I know everybody's going to say, "Okay, boomer," and it's not really a generational. To me, the most interesting question isn't a generational question. It's a, what do people want the Super Bowl to be as a situation, as a context? Is it a family event? And so that and the other thing that I think is probably true is that if the secondary dancers had been provocative in their costumes, etc., it would not have been as critical, because that was primarily seen by the live audience because the camera, TV simplifies and concentrates everything it touches. So we're doing close-up because it's to the camera. Well, her costume wasn't designed
For close-up.
Close-up, it's too much.
Yeah.
It's designed for the spectacle of the arena in the Super Bowl. It's like stage makeup. It looks bad up close because it's designed to look good far away. And so I think part of the challenge, too, is, again, this situational media dynamics. It's not a generational thing. I think gorgeous and great, but it's like, what is the situation? And this is, coming back to music and creative process. I mean, this is what you wrestle with all the time. We'll sit down and go, should we do this song? It's like,
is it appropriate?
Where are we going to do it?
Yeah.
I love it. It's too down tempo for this, and this. The only place we might do it is at a wedding, or for a first dance, or where are we going to do this song? Or could we do this song? So we're constantly pulling together the music and the situation. Is this a good pub song?
Or is it a good wedding
for trio?
song?
Yeah.
Did you see the situation? Do you know who Lizzo is?
Yeah.
Did you see the situation with her happened a couple weeks ago where she showed up to an NBA game and she was wearing this outfit and basically, I'm pretty sure it was just like a really big shirt and she was just like wearing a thong under it or whatever, and she only cut out the back of her shirt to like have her butt sticking out.
Wow.
And she wore it to the NBA, posted on social media like it was this big thing, and everybody had something to say about it.
Right.
And there's this trend because Lizzo is a very big woman, and there's a lot of people who criticized it. The opposing people who are for Lizzo or for whatever were like, oh, you're just saying that because she's a big woman and you don't want to see that. But if it was a good-looking girl, you would have no problem with it, which I don't think is the case. And I thought about it and I watched some podcasts and stuff where people had their opinions, and it was the same kind of thing you were saying, where it was like the NBA game is a family event and this girl is walking with her butt just hanging out.
Right. Well, I mean, and of course, women go through this all the time, right? Deborah Tannen says there's no unmarked woman. Every woman gets evaluated, if not by men, by other women, et cetera, right? In a way that men don't, generally speaking. So, we there's layers to this conversation, right?
Of course.
But from a, if she's really trying to say, here's my argument, I'm doing this as a transgression on purpose, much like a protest movement, right? We're going to burn a flag, or we're going to lay down in the street, right? We're going to do a social transgression in order to make a larger point. Okay, I may not agree with your tactics, but at least I understand what you're trying, the conversation you're trying to contribute to, or the conversation you're trying to get started that nobody will start talking about until something radical happens.
And I don't think that was it. If I'm being honest, I think she just did this for publicity.
Right. So then the question, then we're getting into motives and all that sort of thing. So the difference between, I think, a shocking lyric functioning responsibly and a shocking lyric or a shocking costume choice functioning slowly as a celebrity move or a shock for shock's sake move, that's a hard one to discern, but that's the kind of critical thinking we're teaching our students to have. I mean, and not to, it's going to sound like who would want to be in my band, but that's the kind of stuff we talk about as a band, right? So there's a lyric there's some lyrics that are dated. Like, do we update the lyric? Do we change the lyric? Can we still sing it, or do we just drop the whole song because there's 400 equally good songs that don't have this problem?
It's true. So, continuing on the topic of culture and music, I understand that you have traveled quite a few places. I think it was last summer you did a study abroad program to, where was it?
So actually starting to travel more. My whole life I was kind of just domestic, but traveling to Ireland for a conference.
Cool. I went to Dublin for a weekend last fall. It was really cool. I saw the Lumineers there.
Oh, wow.
And I got the lead singer's guitar pick, which is really cool. That's a great show, too.
Yeah, that's big. And going to Italy for the second time with students over spring break. So Ireland, of course, very musical culture. Both of them are. But the pub culture is for real.
Yeah.
Because we were off the beaten path. We were on the western side. We flew into Shannon, and we were circling our way toward Dublin for the conference. And went into these small pubs, and there's a troubadour in the corner, and the villagers are coming in, not tourists, and they're singing along, and it was wonderful.
So how do you see the differences in culture impacting music in the places that you've been?
Well, I think, it's one of the places that you really start to see the impact of globalization, because there would have been an era where they would not have had to be actively trying to filter out the outside music because it never was getting there, right? I mean, the AM radio frequency
can only go so far,
and all of that sort of thing. So now I think there's two challenges. One is the globalization, and one is the specialization. So I can create a Pandora channel that is all the music I've ever liked, and maybe a little bit of new stuff. So a friend of mine says, it used to be 250 songs that everybody knew, and now it's 250 million songs that nobody knows.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it.
If you and I, you play guitar, I play harmonica and keyboard. If we sat down in my garage and we wanted to find a song we could play together, it might take an hour.
Yeah, we'd have to go searching.
Because
there's just so many.
Right, but there was an era where you would have known the folk songs, and I would have known the folk songs, and I would have been teaching you the music, and you would have been teaching me the one new song you wanted to add to that list, And now it's, well, have you heard of this guy? Have you heard of that guy? Have you heard of this guy?
And that's kind of like the cool thing is to be like, oh, do you know him? Like, you kind of are in it for your, like,
right.
It's kind of something to brag about sometimes where you're like, oh, I know this artist that nobody else knows that's really good. And then you go show him and people are like, oh, this man showed me this artist, So it's interesting how that's changed.
Yeah. And it's not a bad thing. It's just a different thing. It's just, so like, and I'm, so I'm listening to Hipster Cocktail Party on Pandora because I like hearing the new stuff.
Hipster Cocktail Party.
Yeah, it's a good channel.
Do hipsters have cocktail parties? I've never been to one.
Apparently, probably down the down low. Know, with some.
It's like very casual, ripped jeans and a baggy T-shirt attire.
Christmas lights thrown across the IKEA bookshelf, and then off we go. But the cool thing is, so I hear this guy Chris Faker, Faker, I think, doing a remake of No Diggity. And it's so down low and chill, and he's using a Wurlitzer keyboard, which I love, and and it's just like, oh my goodness, and I gotta look it up, and now I'm trying to run it by the band, and we're like, do we want to do this or something? But old dog's new tricks.
Yeah, and that's a good thing about the streaming era is that the different genres of music have really started to blend together, and it's hard a lot of the times to define a certain artist or a certain song by one genre.
Well, and it's also allowing a smaller artist to get out there without having to go through the record labels and getting on the shelf because it's not the right time and all that sort of stuff. And so the indie artists, if they're not trying to take over the world, they can find their people and their people can find them. And then it's almost like the microbrewery scene, right? I mean, I'm not trying to take over. I'm not trying to compete with Bud. I'm trying to find 200 people that like the way I do beer and want to buy my beer on the regular. And then I can be a brewery, a microbrewery. And I think that's happening with artists who aren't trying to become a star. They're trying to find their people.
Their niche,
and do their thing and create community. Which that gets back to my heart when you're just trying to create community,
Yeah, and that is a universal thing that I found is that no matter what culture you're in and how they view music or what kind of music they play, it tends to bring people together that maybe wouldn't have been together without that scene, which I think is a beautiful thing.
And there's a great documentary on Jimmy Buffett and the Parrot Head culture.
What's it called?
I want to say Parrot Head.
Parrot Head.
I believe it was on Netflix, and I stumbled across it. And what I found amazing, because I'm not a big Buffett fan. I mean, I like some of his. We do some of his hits for sure. Margaritaville's almost required by law.
Yeah, it's a must.
If you're within 20 miles of the coast. So, But there's a bunch of artists that don't do Jimmy covers that have been embraced by Parrot Heads, and those folks raise millions of dollars for charity every year at these Jimmy Buffett events, at these, there's a Buffett Week out in Michigan. It's all week, and it's the only way that town survives. That festival, the store owners, the restaurants, the gas stations, all those, they need this to stay a viable small town. And they're there. These people are there and they raise money for this handicapped child and this person to go here, and it's amazing. I was blown away.
I really want to check that out.
But it was community, and that's what they kept talking about over and over again: is community.
Yeah, I'm in this class called the Theory and Practice of Hip Hop right now, and we're reading this book called Can't Stop, Won't Stop. I forget who it's by, but it's really interesting. And I haven't really read too much throughout my college career, and this is the first book that I think I'm going to make it all the way through with. Yeah. It's required, but it's also by my choice to actually do it. And in the beginning of the book, it talked about the sound of Jamaica coming to New York, which is one of the ways that hip hop originally got started in New York. And it was so interesting. So in Jamaica, there was a time where politics was directly connected to music. And the whole Rastafarian scene was coming up. And there were almost like these gangs that would form for each DJ. And there was politics going on behind the scenes where during election years, certain officials would back one DJ or whatever that was really popular and get their message through there and hire people to basically like cause harm and violence to the other DJ's crew or whatever. And they had these full-scale battles between one DJ on one side of the yard is what they called it, and another DJ on the other side of the yard. And whichever sound system was the loudest, like the people would go to. And it was so integrated with the community in everyday life, and I just thought that was so interesting.
Yeah,
and one of the ways that it got brought to New York was this guy immigrated from Jamaica. I can't remember if it was DJ Kool Herc or if it was another guy, maybe Africa Bambaataa. But basically, his dad had a really, really nice sound system, and people in New York, especially the Bronx, which is where hip-hop kind of originated, didn't have the money to get these nice sound systems. And so this man came in and kind of inherited his dad's sound system and was able to bring that music to the youth scene, which really kind of sparked a whole movement, which is really interesting.
Yeah, and that's the amazing part about music is how powerfully it can interact with the human condition to create anthems of war, anthems of deception, or unity, change. I mean, people, there are light little bubblegum pop songs, and there's nothing wrong with that. Paul McCartney said there's nothing wrong with writing a love song. But there's also this great opportunity and great responsibility to kind of go, okay, like we've looked at a couple songs and we went, yeah, there's cheating songs and then there's celebrating infidelity songs.
Yeah.
This one crosses for us. We're gonna pass on this one, or hey, there's drug use and alcohol, but then this one seems to be a little bit too wink, nudge, nudge about it. Yeah. Not only because we're professors, like we've had to deal with that too. It's like, well, he can't sing that.
Yeah.
Like we're not gonna sing,
Yeah, you come into class and one of your students,
we're not singing Van Halen's
coming up high, like, oh, you inspired me to smoke weed before class.
Yeah, we're not doing Hot for Teacher,
which is a shame because that song is.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I was when I was in grad school, one of the PhD students, when I was getting my master's, he was getting his PhD. His name was perfect rock and roll name, Joe Gow, and he had a band called Johnny Deadline, which was
catchy.
Great college town band, and he could shred and he could sing, and they did a lot of Stones and Springsteen and whatever, and they're shredding and just packing out the college bars. And I go in, and he pulls me up on stage for some harmonica stuff, and that was really fun. And but he would have. He'd have students the next day say, I don't have my paper, but I saw you last night. He's like, well, that's a zero. I don't know. You know, like,
Yeah, like,
I mean, like that's me in a band, but I'm here.
Yeah,
and I have
got to play the role.
And I have my lecture for today, so I figured out how to do both. You know, so we've had that, and some of that's been great with our students. We don't play a lot of student venues right now, but we were playing the Whiskey and with a line out the door, and again we've done those phases, and some bars that have since closed down, which were really hot college bars, and we played them 10 to 2 and did that whole thing. And it was neat for our students of that era to see people who could be hardcore teachers by day, take that mission seriously, tell you that's a C, and then fist bump you at a concert.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think
like,
that's definitely a way to enforce the kind of comfortability of students in the classroom, because a lot of times, especially people just coming in to college, like freshmen, it's intimidating. Especially, I know Com 200, I took that class, and it's a huge class. Yeah. And it's really cool to have a professor that you can kind of relate to on a level like that, and still, I mean, there's definitely, you gotta also know he's your professor, but it makes you, at least it made me more comfortable being there.
I think anytime, I mean, again, I think some people get into teaching because they want to be a subject matter expert. I'm here to teach you calculus or public speaking, and then that's it, right? Your 850 number, please. Boom.
Yeah.
I think there's most of us in our department are feeling a higher calling than that, and kind of going, I don't mind if I put myself out there as a role model for how to do life three-dimensionally, to say you can be really, really smart, and then also really go have fun, and you can be really careful about your work, and then there's times when you can be really flexible and laid back about what you're wanting to do at the beach, and you should have hobbies that stretch you and grow you, and you should also have escapes that allow you to just kind of do your thing. And so I'm down at the gym playing basketball, I'm in a band, but I'm also trying to crush it from,
as being a professor.
9 to 5 being a professor.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, well, I think that's it. I think we're about out of time.
All right.
And if you could just sing us off for us.
Ooh, wow. All right, let me see. All right, let me do this. All right. All right, we'll do a little bit of Ain't No Sunshine. All right.
Oh, I love that song, Bill Withers.
Yeah. Ain't no sunshine when she's gone. Ain't no sunshine when she's away. Ain't no sunshine when she's gone. She's always gone to stay anytime she goes away. And that's the show. Thank you, Dr. Richard Olsen.